Hey coaches, welcome back to Coach Parker's Coaching Youth Football Tips and Talk podcast. I'm Coach Parker, your host. Thanks for tuning in today. In this podcast, we'll be talking about keys to fun, success, and winning as a coach. This is part 2 in the series. Thanks for joining, and let's get into it. But before we do that, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps out in Google search and with the podcast and videos and search engines. So if you get a chance, subscribe, like, hit the notify, comment, do all that good stuff. All that interaction with the podcast and the video podcast does me really well, helps me out a ton, costs you nothing. So please subscribe today if you get a chance. Thanks. Again, this is part 2 in the keys to fun, success, and winning as a coach and for your team. We had gone through organizational planning, time commitment, goals, expectations, how much do you know about football, how much do you know about youth football, your management skills, and communication in the first part of this series. So look for part 1. In this part, we're going to talk about, again, communication, just review that a little bit, since it is very, very important. Leadership, ethical and moral leadership, learn your league's leadership and best teams and coaches, team discipline, and choosing coaches. So let's jump right in and back into communication, and the reason I wanted to go back over this particular skill set is you really must be or become a good communicator. You really must learn to over communicate. You know, they say it takes people 3 times to hear something, and that's communicating with your staff, with your players, with your parents, with the league, with the fans, with league commissioners, with the referees. This is communication that encompasses all of that. So you must get really good at that. I will say, if you're not the best at all of those, you may want to, choose a team parent or an assistant coach that's really good at communication. If you're more of a Bill Belichick type grumpy coach, which I am, and I've partnered with several other coaches that I've co-coached with and been assistants to and been a head coach with that are really good at communication, which helps me in the overall process. I'm really good at website communication, email, social media, but one-on-one, I'm not as good. I'm good with crowds. I'm good with a lot, talking to a lot of people. But one-on-ones, I could probably do better at. So look for somebody when you choose a coach, if you don't have that communication skill, to partner with. It's very, very important to be a good communicator. And some of the tools that can help you do that, besides choosing a coach or a team parent that's good at communication, is there's a lot of technology now that wasn't there 15, 20 years ago. Email, great way to set up email reminders, send out weekly emails about what's going on. I like to use Shutterfly kind of as my team site because it's free. There's TeamSnap. There's a ton of those out there now, but I have so many years entrenched in Shutterfly. That's what I use. There are text apps for groups like GroupMe and Band. You can also set up a Facebook page and a Twitter account that will do all kinds of things now for you. So you've got that. There's cell phone messaging apps like Facebook Messenger that you can set up. And others, there's you can do a blog or a website like in Blogger, Tumblr, or WordPress for your team, which you can do all those all for free if you want to geek out that far. And you can also do Microsoft Word documents to hand out documents, PowerPoint. I use a ton of PowerPoint, but you've got Google Docs and I think Google Slides that'll do all that. So there's really no excuse for poor communication now. And good communication with your staff and your parents and all that makes you look good, makes you look organized, and that's the key for the league and for parents for you, is you really want to look like you know what you're doing, even if you're faking it to be great, that sometimes can work. So, if you've got to fake being a good communicator and that helps you get to it, then do it. But communication is very, very is a very, very key skill. And remember, your parent meeting, and I've taken quite a lot of time on this, is critical. And I'll have a whole nother video podcast on your parent meeting. You can see on my old coaches training videos, there's a whole video on that, and I think there's an old podcast on that, so look for that. Also, screaming and raging at your players in the games and at practice, and we'll talk about that in another podcast, that's not communication either. So make sure you're respecting everybody when you do communicate. The other thing is leadership, responsibility, and attendance. Look, leaders make tough decisions, and when you make a tough decisions, make sure you know all about what decision, all the things that are going on in that decision you're going to make. That means really listening to the problem and learning about the problem, what's going on. It's your responsibility as a head coach to take control, and that's not demanding, but that's earning that leadership through organizational planning, good communications, goals, and doing what it takes to be a leader. You really can't demand leadership. The other thing is you're responsible for managing these 60 plus people. So, you just can't take off for 2 weeks and go to Tahiti, or just decide you're going to be late every day to practice. Head coaches are always there. They're always early. They always know what's going on. They're able to understand all the problems with the team and what's happening with the league. And you've got to be responsible enough to get all that information, communicate all that information, be there on time, make sure everybody's safe, and all of that good stuff. Lombardi's 15 minutes early is basically on time, is a very good rule. I usually try to get to practice at least 30 minutes early. That way I'm on Lombardi time, plus I can set up my skill drills at the first of practice. And the other thing is I'm always the last to leave, and that should be a key for you, because there's always late kids and parent pickups, and you never should leave a player at the field without having somebody there with that player. So make sure you do all that, and that's what leaders do. They do the hard things, and you can't really demand to be the leader, but people will follow someone that's organized, has a plan, that understands football and knows what they're doing, that's a good communicator and is a good manager. They will follow that person. But if you're just dogging that in a bunch of those key areas, it's hard for people to get behind that. So understand, if people are not looking at you as a leader, you should look internally first, because I see that a lot. The other thing, which has really been killing me, because there's a lot of TV shows out about, tiny tot football and all that stuff, and you see some of that. It's your responsibility to be a role model. And to me, and maybe because I grew up within the church, is that I really think a role model needs to have ethical and moral leadership. You can't be cussing around 5 to 12-year-olds. I'm sorry. Even in high school, I think the cussing went a little bit too far with even my high school coaches. At official events, no smoking, tobacco, no drugs, no drinking, no cussing. I came up also within the YMCA organization for 5 years when I first started playing. So, this is a big deal for me. Is I think you really have got to be a role model. And to me, a role model is not cussing and drinking or smoking or chewing tobacco in front of the kids. To me, it's like, you need to think your church-going grandmother is there at practice and in the games that are around you when you're around the kids. And how do you act at her house when there's company around. She'd pinch you or give you a nice slap, or at least mine would, if I was acting up. So just kind of think about it that way, and that may help you be this ethical and moral leader. Because a lot of these kids, they come from broken homes, they've divorced, and they may be looking for someone to look to give them that role model as a man, or even if you're coaching, you're a woman coach, a female coach, just someone that can be looked up to. You really need to give them that. And I don't think drinking and cussing in front of the kids at an official event is really, if they're around, depends on what your rules are. But I would look to your grandmother, and if she's going to approve of that. The other thing to have fun and success with winning, and I think this is a really big one, and I learned this when I got to Denver. I was starting a new tackle league, and it was a tough league, and I knew that. And so I wanted to learn the league, who the best coaches were in teams. And so after they approved me to be a coach, I made sure that I took a couple of folks to lunch, learned the league, learned who the best coaches were in teams, and found out why they were winning and how they were winning and what I needed to do to compete. And that really helped me out. And I think that will help you if you really get in and find out who those folks are. And if you can get your league to give you a mentor within the league, maybe they're not in your division, or maybe they're older and they've been a good winning coach or successful coach or respected coach within your league. See if they can't do that for you, or lean on a league commissioner that's been that. I had a league commissioner at the time that I became friends with and leaned on him, and that really helped me out. Learn your competition within the league. It's not scouting, it's just learning about the league and what it takes. I mean, you may move into a passing league where all these coaches pass and they're good at it. So you've got to understand what that means. So take a look at that. The other thing is team discipline. Team discipline doesn't mean punishment. It just means setting good ground rules and expectation, and then sticking to those and being firm and not letting people slide without consequences. If you set goals and you've set rules in your team parent meeting, and this is how things are going to work, and this is what you're looking for, if people start not following those, then you as a leader need to step up and have some discipline and say, this is what we're going to do if we're not following those. The big deal that I see around this team discipline and issues with parents is when your superstar studs get away with not showing up to practice or being late all the time, or you're letting them do stuff in practice, and then other kids, especially maybe weaker or minimum play kids, are getting punished for doing those same things, and you're not holding your star players accountable. To me, your star players, and I've been one of those in high school, you need to hold those folks accountable. I think we're seeing what's happening when these studs get better and they get into the pros. What respect they have for authority is just diminished, because we've catered to them as coaches for so long and not held them accountable and basically given them anything. And that's not serving them or the community or the world any good by just letting these superstars become prima donnas. So that's my take on team discipline. Make sure you're fair. It doesn't mean yelling and punishing kids, and try not to be making up rules on the fly. I try to set my parent meeting with all those rules, overdo it and then pull some back, but don't be trying to set up new rules on the fly for certain people. The last one today in part 2 is really choosing coaches in your team parents, and I would say be really careful on this one. You really need to ask yourself, do you know these people? Do you really know them? Are they going to mesh with me? Do their personalities seem like they'll mesh? I know sometimes your volunteers, you kind of you have to accept what you get, but If you don't have to do that and you have a chance to interview people and go through that process, and the league will have background checks, you can ask around about people, have they played, do they know, have they coached this before, that kind of thing. That will help you out. That's what I did in Colorado in the new league when I got there, moving from Dallas to Colorado. I interviewed people. I had that opportunity, got on my team, and it worked out pretty good. Did have a couple of issues with the team mom, and that issue with the team mom sometimes will turn into that player did not turn out to be a player that got a lot of play time. And sometimes team parents, if they're on the coaching staff or on as a team parent, they may think that just because they're volunteering, their son or daughter should get a lot of play time, and you need to explain that doesn't work that way. The other thing, all these people, they need to understand they're following you. They're not leading, unless you set it up for a co-head coach thing, which I've done before and it works out great. But you really need to set up is, they're going to follow your direction, and that's critical. And if they stop following your direction and they start causing problems, you need to ask yourself, do I need to cut bait and let them go? And that may be a decision you need to make. I know I've been an assistant on a couple of teams, love the coaches, but we don't mesh for whatever reason. It just didn't mesh. Our communication styles and personalities as far as coaching together just didn't work. So I chose not to go back to those teams. And sometimes that happens. You just have to make that decision for yourself and how that's going to work out for your staff. So be very careful with choosing coaches. And I know some folks say, you don't want more than 3 coaches. I like to have, once I get to know people, I like to have a fairly big staff, especially with younger teams, just because we can do a lot of stations and have that help. But just make sure that they know, hey, these are official coaches. You're just a practice helper dad. Make sure everybody knows their responsibility and how they're going to fit on the team. And that comes back to communication. And make sure that's communicated, that you're the leader and everything, especially when you're choosing your coaches. Make sure they know their responsibility and what they're expected. So, well, that's going to end my part 2 because I'm hitting 17 and a half minutes here. And stay tuned for part 3 of Keys to Fun, Success, and Winning. And this has been part 2. Remember, coaching youth football is hard, so it's a learned skill. Takes some time. You're herding cats. Parents are crazy. League politics. There's other great coaches that are out there. Maybe you didn't get studs on your team, and it's a lot of time commitment. So remember, it's not very easy. It's hard, and you need to learn how to do it. So thanks for joining me today. Hey, if you'd like to help me out and help me make more free youth football coaching tips, podcasts, videos, all that good stuff, I've got a bunch of playbooks over at coachparker.org that you could purchase, which will really help me out. And then you can also, as always, please subscribe to the podcast and the video podcast. That really helps out a ton. So I really appreciate that. So this is Coach Parker with Coach Parker's Coaching Youth Football Tips and Talk podcast. I appreciate you joining me today. Hey, remember to play for fun, and winning is funner. I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.